understand and I'd always been in the military, so I'd read a lot. I understood the psychology of breaking you down and then build you back up, that kind of stuff. And there's a reason they do it. It works. And I knew the psychology of it, being in sales. And I've told plenty of rookies, there's a lot of selling being a cop. It's an aspect that I think we could really impart and teach. And so I understood all that. I knew that I needed to know it. I wanted to be a good cop, and I know there's a lot of knowledge you need to have. So I embraced all of that stuff. When they were training for D-Day, my grandfather met my grandmother. She was a British girl working in one of the factories, as most of them did, and he actually followed her home. She lied about her name, but he persisted. And so they were to be married on June 6th, and he no-showed, obviously. So when he came back from Normandy, they did marry. So my grandmother, and I've got a British grandmother. And my mom said something that just clicked. She said, I believe the man my mother met before the war is not the same man that she married after the war. They scream medic, everybody else is in a foxhole, and the medic's the guy that's up and running, not shooting back, not wearing body armor. So it showed the humanity. I go, I get it. It was actually a great moment, and I went back and reflected on what they said in the book, nothing but high praise for my grandfather as a medic. So my initial was like, I can't believe this, but in the end I go, it's really showing him a very special side of the war, being a medic.
You're listening to the ATO Bridging the Divide podcast, brought to you by the Assist the Officer Foundation.
Since 1999, the ATO has given assistance to the first responder community, and now we want to give them a platform to hear their incredible stories.
We also want to hear the stories of the many people that support us.
Our community is small, but it is strong.
We have differences. We don't always agree. And we all make mistakes.
But together we can grow, we can heal.
And we can learn from those mistakes.
And together we can bridge the divide.
Hitler made only one big mistake when he built his Atlantic Wall. He forgot to put a roof on it. Band of Brothers is a Shakespearean reference to the men of Easy Company, the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment, the 101st Airborne Division during World War II. The descriptive phrase Band of Brothers was popularized in the title of a book by historian Stephen Ambrose, recounting the war experiences of the unit. Easy Company was legend to the Army, but the book and miniseries made Easy Company legendary to the world. Easy Company was formed in the summer of 1942 at Camp Toka, where they faced immense rigorous training that pushed them to the limits, to their path, to their destiny at Operation Overlord, also known as D-Day. Easy also participated in events and battles like Operation Market Garden, the Battle of the Bulge, and the capture of Hitler's Eagle's Nest at the end of the war. Today's story is different from our usual episodes, but it does involve one of our own, Dallas PD. And by the time you're finished with this story, you will understand this guest knew why, as he has not only dedicated his life to serving the citizens of Dallas, but he has also had the mission of keeping his grandfather's service and sacrifice alive. Eugene Doc Roe, a St. Martin Parish native, served as a combat medic for the legendary company in World War II. First Lieutenant Jack E. Foley spoke of Roe's skills as a medic. He was there when he was needed, and how he got there, you often wondered. He never received recognition for his bravery. I recommended him for a Silver Star after a devastating firefight when his exploits were typically outstanding. Any man who struggled in the snow and cold, in the many attacks through the open and through the woods, ever deserved such a medal. It was our medic, Eugene Roe. Today's guest is the grandson of this great man, and he has a unique story and passion in his approach to serving, but also keeping history alive, keeping the many people that sacrifice so much to give us the freedoms that we enjoy today in this country. We are proud to welcome on Chris Langlois. Chris Langlois, thanks for coming on.
Good to see you, man.
We are real excited for the content, and also we got one of our own, Chris, a Dallas police officer. But I have a special guest co-host to the mic that I don't think you've heard from him since. He hasn't been on as a regular since episode 112 of the Yanni's murder. Sergeant Dan Mosier, thanks for being back.
Thanks for having me on. Good to be here today.
Chris, we got a lot to get to, but we're going to start at the top like we always do. Talk about growing up and home life.
I'm originally from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and I've got one of those crazy French names, Langlois, that doesn't look like Langlois when you write it out.
No, it does not.
I was actually born in North Dakota. My dad was in the Air Force. I was born on Minot Air Force's base. And if you ever watch any movie that has a nuclear missile process involved in it, when you see the guys get the codes from the book and they break that piece of plastic and they match the codes, make sure it's really authentic. That's what my dad did. He was in the bottom of 30, 40, 50 feet down and underground in the middle of the North Dakota plains, 48 hours. And if the code would have ever come across, my dad would have broken that piece of plastic and pressed the button. So turn the keys, press the button. So
it's fascinating. Yeah, anybody that watches movies like Hunt for Red October and Crimson Tide, those little plastic deals. And we always thought that was bullshit. That was for the movies. Yeah. That's real.
It is real. In fact, we were watching. It was a Thanksgiving. I'll never forget. We were watching Hunt for. No, it was Red Tide. Red Tide.
Crimson Tide.
Crimson Tide.
Yeah, with Denzel and Gene.
I'm an LSU guy, so it's hard for me to say anything Alabama related. But so my dad, when they breaking the codes, my dad says, when I was in, the color of the plastic was top secret. Yeah. And I said, "Oh, that's cool, Dad. What color was yours?" And he goes, I'm not going to tell you. So,
that's I believe that.
Yeah, so it's pretty cool.
Can't tell you it's magenta. So speaking of the fact, what was home life like for you?
Just a typical, middle class. My dad was a assistant professor at LSU. My mom worked for the city. She worked for the library, did the accounting for the library system for the parish. And I had a little brother 3 years younger than me, and we just, played baseball for a couple of years as a kid and rode bikes and jumped on trampolines and, disappeared in the woods for hours like we could do back then. I mean, you can't do that today. That's an Amber Alert. Disappear for 3 hours in the woods today.
We get an alert on my phone.
So, just typical middle class, Boy Scouts and all that kind of stuff.
So for people not from the South or around Texas and Louisiana, in Louisiana they call counties parishes. So it wasn't a church; it was actually a county.
That's right. Yes, I forgot. The only state that has parishes, not counties.
It's interesting. Thanks, Dan, for throwing that in. Chris, when did you become aware about your grandfather's involvement in in his path and then participate in World War II?
It's funny. It's a story that I remember that for no reason. I mean, it's relevant today, but there's no reason for me to have remembered it at the time. So the book came out, Band of Brothers came out, written by Stephen Ambrose in 1992. And I was a sophomore or junior at LSU. And like any good college student, I came home on Sundays to wash clothes and get some mama's cooking. And I remember my mom handed me the book. And so being a good college student, I turned to the back on the index, looked up Roe, and he's on 3 pages. Very quick, few sentences on each page. I read those in a minute and snapped the book closed. Sometimes you close a book just perfectly and it pops. And for some reason, I remember that. And so if your grandfather fought in World War II and he's on 3 pages of a book, I just went, oh, well, he didn't do anything in the war. And so that was it. And, of course, in college, beer and girls are the priority.
They take precedent.
Not necessarily in that order. And then sometimes you went to class. So it was of no importance. It was not on the radar in any way, shape, or form that my grandfather, my mom said, your grandfather jumped on D-Day. That meant nothing to me. It meant nothing to me. And, of course, which is a crime now. I mean, if I should have grabbed a tape recorder and rushed over to his house and sat at his knee and just said, start talking, Pawpaw. So that's the first indication that my grandfather was in World War II.
What was he like?
I always say he was a cowboy. He wore, not blue jeans, but that material, but he wore like tan or khaki.
That was the wear of the day.
It was. He wore some pearl snap Cowboy shirts, wore cowboy boots, wore a cowboy hat. His whole life, he was after the war, he came back and worked on roads. He was in construction his whole life. So, I mean, he was, his skin was leathered from the Louisiana heat his whole life. He drove a pickup truck, worked, operated bulldozers and backhoes, which was cool as a kid. We'd go over and, climb on backhoes. And that was awesome as a kid, little boy. But that's what he was, man. He was, just a cowboy, salt of the earth, working man, smoked his Lucky Strikes till it killed him.
Yeah. We're going to get it. We're going to get really in depth in what he actually did in the war. And it was, it is definitely a lot more significant than just jumping on D-Day and being noted 3 times in a book.
Correct.
But you would not find that out till much later.
Correct.
Your college, where did you go?
I graduated at LSU in Baton Rouge.
Oh, LSU. Okay.
Go Tigers.
All right. Well, hey, they're.
Which, by the way, is spelled Geaux, not G-O.
Correct.
Yeah. When you were at LSU, I know beers and girls was priority, but what was the second priority as far as like what were you working towards and where did you want to end up once you left there?
So, it's funny. So my degree's in economics, but I wanted to be a cop in college because of the TV show Cops. So we watched Cops all the time. So that's really was my inspiration. I wanted to be a cop. I knew when I graduated, I wanted to be a cop.
Okay. What was so appealing about the profession for you?
There's nothing else like it. There is nothing else. People talk about the authority, and that's one thing, but it's really protect and serve is such a cliche to a lot of people, but it's not for some of us. And I like the adrenaline side. I mean, I'd be lying if I said otherwise, but there's no doubt that when you put on that uniform and you hit the streets, you're able to make a difference. I still to this day love catching bad guys. It's just one of my most favorite things on the planet to do. Protect
and serve. So what does that mean to you? Because you say that it may be different for other people, and when you're asking the interview, why do you want this job? What does that mean to you?
You're in a unique position. You're driving around and there's nothing you can't roll up on where you're the first guy on the scene. And then it's on you to put bandages on a guy that's been shot. That's most people who get up and drive to work don't get to do that. And they'll never have that opportunity. And so being able to do that, and I've done it, as most of us have, but people need help, and sometimes you're the one that helps. I tell rookies, it's as simple as there's a giant branch across the road, taking up 2 lanes. Some cops will just drive past that. We're not going to drive past that. It's as little as taking a branch, making it out of the road, so that everybody can go about their day. They do what they do. It's as big as putting a bandage in a guy that's been shot. Sticking a bandage in somebody's hole on their body. So it's as small as that. It's as big as that.
I like that. So why Dallas PD?
So when I was graduating LSU, Baton Rouge police were making like $24,000 a year, and all my friends were graduating business degrees, making 40, 45. And I go, I'm already poor as a college student. I don't want to graduate and be poor. I'd have to move back in with my parents at $22,000 a year. So unfortunately, I did not become a cop straight out of college. I decided to go chase money and get into sales. And that's not my forte. I blew my knee out for the first time in college playing a pickup game of basketball during finals. So my knees were not always in the right place. And then I get into sales, and you do make more money than $22,000 a year. And you're like, well, I don't want to leave $70,000 to go make $30,000.
Yeah.
So,
what kind of sales were you doing?
I did insurance sales in the beginning, straight out of college, and then I got into the mortgage business. I was a headhunter for the IT industry that collapsed. Then I was in the mortgage business and it collapsed. I'd like to say that I was going to come to the crime business and make it collapse, but that has not happened yet.
No, it is a recession-proof, pandemic-proof organization.
No doubts. So finally, my knees were in good shape, and my career was not. So the mortgage business collapsed in 2007, and I said, "That's it. I'm going to finally do what I want. I always wanted to be a cop. It's been a dream, and so it finally happened in 2007. At that time, I know it's hard to imagine because today you can throw a dart and hit a municipality and they're hiring, and that was not the case in 2007. It was Dallas, Carrollton, and Richardson was it. And Dallas had that $10,000 bonus. You remember that?
I remember.
And they were moving quick. And so Dallas came in, boom, process quick, offered me the job. Here I am, which is good. I like the idea of being in the big city anyway, so it worked out perfect.
When you what year did you start? 07?
07.
Okay. And what academy class was that?
303.
Do you remember your class motto?
You killing me. 303, excellence is what we strive to be.
All right. Yeah.
No, yeah.
No,
better than mine.
Yeah, it is funny though, because we had other people on here. We tried, and some don't remember at all.
Put me on the spot.
Yeah, no, you got it. There's people who just cannot remember, but it is fun. It is kind of comical looking back at seeing the stretches that some academies go through to make it fit and rhyme. Yeah. It matters while you're in there.
That's
I'm
right.
in 287, so nothing rhymes with 7 except 11, heaven, and, well, nothing. So
Well,
I was
hopefully
motivated and dedicated.
What
What
was
do you
yours?
do? Motivated and dedicated.
287.
287, that was it.
Wow.
Yeah.
You don't
Boring.
want to put heaven in a
No,
class
no,
model.
no,
No,
no.
nobody
You don't go
nobody
there.
wants to.
It's not, no.
Bring
time,
that on to
time and
yourself.
place. Time and place.
Yeah. So how was the academy for you though? Because you go from sales and you're actually finally doing what you want to do, which is to be a cop, to serve. You're in there, and I love the academy because you become pretty much your little family.
That's right. It was great for me. Again, because I was 35 in the academy, so I was older than most of the guys. I think I graduated third oldest. But I was finally where I wanted to be. It was awesome. I didn't mind the PT. 100 push-ups a day was awesome. Running on the weekends and all that. It was all great. And back to school, studying all that stuff. None of that bothered me one bit because I was just a pig in slop. I was glad to be there. I ended up being class president, and that's still an honor I'm very proud of. So I loved it. I had a great time.
That's interesting. So you actually were 35 and you were third oldest.
Mm-hmm.
That is, yeah. We had two people that were 38 in my class, and I started at 22, so I was really young and dumb.
Right.
Being the oldest and probably the most maturest in the class.
Yeah, it makes a big difference. You can kind of you understand and I'd always been in the military. So I'd read a lot. I understood the psychology of breaking you down and then build you back up. That kind of stuff. And being
molding.
It is absolutely 100%. There's a reason they do it. It works. And I knew the psychology of it. Being in sales, and I've told plenty of rookies. There's a lot of selling being a cop. It's an aspect that I think we could really impart and teach. And so I understood all that. I knew that I needed to know it. I wanted to be a good cop, and I know there's a lot of knowledge you need to have. So I embraced all of that stuff.
Did you embrace the mentor role there for your classmates, though?
I did, 100%. And I can't remember the process of how we voted to be. I don't remember if I nominated myself to be class president. I probably did. I wanted that role. Yeah, I'll never be above a corporal. In this job, I don't want to be a supervisor because I want to be on the streets and I want to catch bad guys. But at that point, I knew that I could make a difference. I could impart a little bit of older guy knowledge into the class.
Now, well, I was, like I said, I was 22, and I was more interested in my next practical joke than being a leader.
You're still more interested in your next practical joke.
I am,
so.
yeah, and I happen to have a microphone now.
Yeah.
So what's up? So when you get out, first time, how many of your classmates are still here?
Man, I wish I'd have counted.
How are you in your class?
We were upper 40s.
Man,
That was during that hiring push.
It
right,
was,
where we
yeah.
were
So
getting bused from Michigan and recession and all that.
we had a guy.
we're getting there again, though. We're
Yeah.
getting some bigger
Yeah.
classes from people from all across, outside of the country.
Yep.
Actually,
I don't know off the top of my head.
but you got some close friends. You still have some close friends.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I really, looking back, I took the academy for granted. Once you're in the middle of it, you can't wait to get out, be real police and all that. But when you look at it now, into my 28th year, I'm like, man, I really wish I would have appreciated that more. The bonding, the actual, you're getting paid with full benefits to get better, to get molded, and to learn a lot of cool stuff and get some of the best training out there.
That's right.
And I think a lot of people, you got to stop and really pause and appreciate what's going on, because life gets much different once you get out of the academy.
For sure. Yeah.
Where'd you go? Where'd you go out of the academy?
Went to North Central. I lived up north of Dallas.
So that worked out.
Yeah, it's perfect. Yeah.
What are some of the? When you got out there on the streets, what was something you just liked to do, and what you didn't like to do?
It's funny you say that, because I learned I'm a big traffic guy still to this day, but I was first watched midnight shift, and I learned very quickly. After 2 o'clock, the car obviously the calls start dying down, and I was so excited to be a cop. There wasn't no way I was going to find a tree or go sit under and do nothing at 3 a.m. So man, I just learned traffic stops is the king. Man, you get into people's business. You get guns and drugs and warrants, and I found that just exhilarating all night long. Zooming up and down, you start learning what taillights look like and which cars you want to look at from half a mile away. And funny story, there was a guy that transferred out of the detectives, just middle of I guess he left in mid bid or whatever. And this is before we used to be able to press the button and do traffic, mark out on traffic. You had to do it on the radio. So the whole watch was eating at Denny's one night, 4 or 5 in the morning, and this guy, he didn't know me from Adam. And he's like, who the F is always on the radio doing traffic all night? Because he wanted to sleep, right?
He was waking him up.
I was waking him up. And I just laughed because, hey, man, you can go sleep. I ain't sleeping, man. I'm finding guys. We're going to jail, man.
So what did you dislike doing?
Crashes.
Man, up there in North Central, there's plenty of on those freeways.
Yeah. Crashes, family violence. I wanted the action, man. I wanted to go to jail. I wanted to find the guy. I wanted to find guns and drugs and warrants and go to jail, man. I didn't want to sit there and take,
be a marriage counselor and referee. And,
no, I still don't like it. It's still a pain. I don't want to do a report. Like I say, when I write a report, I want the words arrested person in it.
No, I agree. There's a purpose for that, but there are many people that enjoy that.
And that's right.
There's people who enjoy doing crash reports.
That's right. God bless them. I love them.
Do not, because especially, I know I'll just shout out to our vehicle crimes unit. Dallas County has the most fatality accidents anywhere in the country.
It's terrible.
It's terrible. And those guys are, and a lot of them, I get all the emails. There are so many at North Central. There's this major freeways for the listeners that are not even in Texas. North Central area, there's several major freeways up there, toll roads, and just the other major 635, 75, and then the George Bush tollway. There's crashes on there every other hour in some cases, but on the weekends there's a lot of drunks.
And they're constantly building it bigger, and so you have construction zones, and then you have more mess, and so it's always I hate driving through there.
Yep.
I'm gonna kind of veer off the police career because I want to get into there's a unique side of your career. We mentioned your grandfather early on because Doc Roe, and the book Band of Brothers came out in 1992.
Correct.
I want to get into Band of Brothers talk, and a lot of people that know me personally and then probably heard it on the show I talk about Band of Brothers and what that show means to me. And what history means to me, especially World War II history. I can't get enough of it. I watched the show before I read the book, but I want to get into the book. You said you became aware of it when it came out, and you quickly flipped to where your grandfather was and you went back into your LSU priorities. Right. Whenever it came out, and you actually, I'm going to be posting pictures, you actually brought a bunch of little memorabilia from the show and also what you're doing now, and also actual historical artifacts from that time in Germany in World War II. But you had the book Band of Brothers, and you have the actual Stephen Ambrose book with a bunch of signatures. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So we knew the series was being made. Of course, we had no concept of the size and scope. But Shane Taylor, who played my grandfather, ended up emailing my aunt and trying to get some background information. He actually called Roe's widow, and she thought it was a prank call. I think she hung up on him, as a matter of fact. But again, not knowing the size and scope, knowing that he's on 3 pages of the book, we thought nothing of this, nothing.
And what year was this?
98, 99, probably 99.
Because your grandfather, he passed in 98.
Correct. Yeah, December of 98.
And was he aware that a show was being made?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so it probably was after. Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I was wondering, if they actually reached out to your grandfather, but it was your aunt.
Yeah, it was my aunt, and then his widow were the 2 people that they reached out to. And but again, nothing. We didn't think anything of it.
When you say I know you as a young man, but did your family have an idea of what he actually did? No. So they were reaching out, just kind of wanting information.
Yeah, the same thing that all the actors did. They all reached out if their man was alive, their veteran was still alive. They'd obviously reach out to him. If not, they'd talk to family members, just to try to get some background. The writers and the directors and researchers had done some work, but as you know, Blythe as an example, they thought he was dead and he lived. So this was pre-internet. So he had to do it old school. He actually had to pick up the phone and call somebody and talk to them.
It was like boots on the ground journalism.
Correct.
Really.
Yeah.
So when they reach out and they touch base, what was the family reaction?
Nothing. We're like,
okay, you're going to do this.
Yeah. Okay.
It's another show.
No, yeah.
But were you aware that like the juggernaut HBO was doing it, and even more so juggernaut Tom Hanks and Spielberg were doing it?
I don't think I did. If my mom and my aunt and uncle, maybe they did, but if they did, they didn't convey that to us. Like, hey, this is going to be an exciting thing. None of that was conveyed. Nobody was excited about the possibility of Pawpaw being in a Tom Hanks, Steven Spielberg gig. No, not a bit.
Because you weren't even aware of the involvement. If you read the book, which I highly recommend reading the book for the listeners. I've listened to the audio book since I've seen the show, and it's amazing. Stephen Ambrose has several books out that are really, really great, but they're working on it. It's my understanding that they actually had to get a lot of the information from the other survivors that actually worked with your grandfather.
That's correct. Everything in the original book in '92 is other men's words about my grandfather. Ambrose depended a lot upon Winters, Malarkey, Lipton, and Gordon when he was doing his initial. And then he depended upon the guys to send in questionnaires about themselves. At that time, my grandfather was not big into talking about the war like most of them, and B, he was going through cancer. Like I said, he smoked Lucky Strikes till it killed him. So he was battling cancer. So he's not in the book for those two reasons. And a lot of the men, we could talk about that later when you talk about the actors, depended upon other men to learn about their character, 100%.
So the show come out in 2001, and I remember I actually listened to an interview with Tom Hanks about there's actually a Band of Brothers podcast out there, and it's older, but Tom Hanks is on the first one. He talks about they released it in 2001, and I want to say like 2 weeks later, 9/11 happened, and it shut down everything.
Yep.
When it came out in 2001, did your family immediately start watching, or did you watch, or how did that go?
Yeah, so let me back you up a little bit, because when the movie comes out, HBO plans this big premiere in 2001 in June for D-Day.
Yes.
So June 6th, they're going to have the premiere on Utah Beach, and we find out late about this. HBO's like, hey, you're welcome to come. We just didn't have you in the database. We didn't know about you. Pay your own way, but come to all the events. And so, because HBO flew the vets and a guest over, chartered a whole airplane with American Airlines, put them up in the Ambassador Hotel in Paris. It was first class all the way. So we find out late. We get our own hotel, and we go. Like 12 or 13 of us from the Roe family go. And so that was my first. Holy cow!
Describe that,
man. So yeah, I know nothing, right? I read Band of Brothers on the flight over. I kid you not. I read it, and that's where I got into Hitler's Eagle's Nest. I was like, oh my gosh, I've got to go to this place. But I read Band of Brothers on the flight over. We get there, and we start meeting all these people. And there's only a couple of actors that are famous: David Schwimmer, Donnie Wahlberg. So all the other actors are unknowns, nobodies.
I do want to get it. We're going to get into the other powerhouse actors that came from this show in 01.
Yep. So I start meeting these actors, and hey, my name's Chris. I'm a grandson of Doc Roe. And how people shake your hand like
gracious. Yeah.
Correct. That's the word. They're like they're happy to meet me. And I was like, what is going on? What is the deal? Hey man, your grandfather. I had several of them tell me, you said your grandfather was an angel, and I go, an angel? He was a cowboy. I'll take that one, but an angel? So these guys had obviously done, been part of the research, been part of the movie making process. They knew more about my grandfather than I did. And so I was blown away by how these guys knew what my grandfather had done, the impact he had made based on the other veterans talking about him. So it was an unbelievable whirlwind experience for a week to be in Paris, to meet these people who knew so much about my grandfather. And man, that is the trip that started me on that's the projectile that sent me on this path.
That was June 6th. So the big premiere, and what was the actual premiere date for the show?
It's like you said, right before 9/11. So we watched it. I learned about my grandfather on Band of Brothers by watching Band of Brothers, just like the rest of the world did.
And you had to, and what sucks about watching a show that's live, you have to wait week to week.
Week Sundays. That's right.
So you actually met Shane Taylor, who portrayed and if I remember right, I just recently watched it, but I don't recall your grandfather's character, Doc Roe, standing out in the first episode when they were at Camp Toka. I can't remember him being a highlighted figure until I got in combat.
That's so correct. So he was not a Toccoa man. He joined right after Toccoa at Camp McCall.
Okay.
So, and then obviously all the maneuvers and all that was right after.
So he didn't experience Sobel?
No, he did not.
Lucky him.
Yeah. Well, he did. I guess Sobel would have been there because Sobel wasn't relieved till England.
Right. That's right.
So
he was doing the training.
Correct. Yep. So
before the jump.
Correct.
So Shane Taylor, what was it like meeting him?
It was neat because we met on the bus. We left Paris on the bus down to Normandy on the 6th, and he just came. He came on. I didn't have a picture of him, and it's like I took a photograph of him hugging my aunt as he was coming down. He met my aunt first coming down the aisle of the bus, and so very emotional. It's still very it gives me goosebumps now. I mean, it's we call him family. He's part of the family.
Well, when these actors, I mean, they want to do a great job portraying whatever character they're portraying, but this is actually not just a fictional character. This is a difference maker in one of the biggest turning points in world history. Not just United States history, world history. Sure. And I would, I'm sure that it was very emotional for Shane because he had the script. Like I said, the actors and the producers and the directors, they knew more about your grandfather than you did as far as the World War II went.
Right.
You met him, and it was emotional, and it was probably very emotional for him.
Absolutely. It was really neat to see all these guys. The actors tell a story when they first got to boot camp. Tom Hanks gave them a very rousing speech, very emotional speech, and said, one day you're gonna meet somebody who says, you played my grandfather, and that still happens. Welch just happened to Welch, and so yeah, everybody who's meeting the men they played. Some of them they get to meet the men they played, or they meet the families, and they know what the actors knew what they went through and knew. So not just my family, even Garnier, who lost his leg, his family never knew the story. He never told the story of why he doesn't have a leg. That's the character of these guys, and so everybody is learning about their family's experience, veteran in the moment.
Well, it started as Stephen Ambrose's book, and then Tom Hanks and Spielberg's vision for making that book come to life.
That's right.
Fascinating. So I want to ask you one question. We're going to get to anybody watch the show. It's a 10-part series, hour long each. And on some of the episodes, not all the episodes, they highlight an individual, a person is kind of the focus for that particular episode. And your grandfather was highlighted in one of the episodes. It centered around his involvement, and it happened to be it was during the Battle of the Bulge.
Right. What
was your reaction and your feelings you had of Doc Roe after you actually learned what he did?
When episode 6, you're right, the Bastogne episode focuses on Roe, and of course we watch it on Sunday night. There's no reruns, right? There's no you can't pause back then. Kids these days don't understand. We didn't have any of those things, so you just watch it. And then you're stuck trying to remember and then digest. And there's a scene in there where he's in the foxhole, the shelling's coming in, screaming medic, and he's not moving. And I thought, I cannot believe they are portraying my grandfather as a coward. And So again, pre-internet, there was bulletin boards. Kids these days have to Google what that is. So I jumped on the Band of Brothers bulletin board afterward, and I'm reading. Everybody's like, "Oh my gosh, this is a great episode, and Doc Rowe's so great, and what a hero," and blah blah. And I'm like, I must have missed it. I think I'm too close.
You're focused on the one part.
That one, and because it's my grandfather. It's not a character on the screen. It's my pawpaw. And so after I watched it again, I realized it was actually a genius moment, because what it's showing is a mortal man.
And it shows the humanity.
The humanity. Cold, hunger. The medic is treating guys, so he has to be.
Treating his friends.
He's treating his friends. He can't jump into a foxhole when the bullets start coming, right? If you ever watch, they scream medic, everybody else is in a foxhole, and the medic's the guy that's up and running, not shooting back, not wearing body armor. So it showed the humanity. I go, I get it. It was actually a great moment, and I went back and reflected on what they said in the book, nothing but high praise for my grandfather as a medic. So my initial was like, I can't believe this, but in the end I go, that's really showing him a very special side of the war, being a medic.
Well, and the exposure to, you're actually sitting in the wellness unit, and I can't let a chance go by to talk about the exposure to trauma.
That's right.
No war is not pretty. Force is not pretty, even if it's used in the police world, the first responder world. But that was a very ugly global war that was going on, and very gritty and very hard fought. And it was basically done by, looking back now, it was done by kids. It was people. It was young men in the early 20s.
That's right.
But not even in their 20s.
And in a much more simple world than we have today, without the worldly knowledge that 22-year-olds have today. So yeah, much different mentality for these guys.
Yeah, that episode struck me because you're describing that, and I recently rewatched it, and he was sitting there, and he was kind of frozen, because knowing how the mind works now, you're trying to process what you're hearing and what you're seeing, and that they portrayed that perfectly, because it brought an authentic approach to a human reaction.
Yeah,
because it did. Because somebody come in there, if somebody started yelling outside of this door right now, fire, we're going to have to sit and process it for a second. Mm-hmm. And being in the woods and he's heard people scream medic with his whole military career.
That's right. Yeah.
It's fascinating. So we're going to break down the show. First episode is starting in 1942 and training at Camp Toccoa.
Yep.
Okay. And one of the only famous actors was David Schwimmer.
Yep.
Let's kind of talk about that first episode.
The neat thing about, because everybody knew him from Friends, was that he really removed himself from Friends. And all of the actors all said he was a great Sobel, which is a testament, right? It's hard to not be David Schwimmer in Friends.
Ross.
It's hard to not be Ross. And so, even the actors were all gave him a lot of accolades toward him being Sobel. So, but that goes back to Tom Hanks and, Captain Dale Dye, who said, here's how you're going to be Sobel. They removed him from the other actors, let him kind of do what he wanted when the other actors were sequestered, let him take leave from boot camp. There's a story about him going off, and I don't know if it's in that podcast. I forget where I heard it, where he kind of hurt his knee, and they thought he was kind of sandbagging it, and he ended up going back to London, or a big city, and he came back with girly magazines and candy. So they were all like, it sucks that he gets this preferential treatment. So they enamored that attitude, just like the real men, to make them kind of hate Sobel, which is just genius. So he did a good job, very good job.
One thing I like about, there's a lot of things I like about the show and the book, is the highlighting great leadership and poor leadership. Yeah. Kind of the focus point. Young Damian Lewis, not many people knew who he was as an actor.
Right.
And did you meet him?
I did.
Okay. Well, it kind of skyrocketed his career, and a lot of careers though, but him especially, because he played Dick Winters.
Right.
He started, when the show starts, he's a lieutenant, and he is over Easy Company. It's pretty amazing as far as being a lieutenant rank, and Captain Sobel was just he really was a hard person to deal with.
100%. And a lot of those guys, would say, Sobel helped make Easy Company. He wrote them hard, made them do PT, do things that the other companies weren't doing. So Sobel takes some credit for making Easy Company. He just definitely was not a people person, definitely was not a leader.
Well, I think I've read that one of the things was he united them in their hate against him, right?
True.
Like they all had a rallying point of, well, we all hate this guy, so they got closer to each
100%,
other.
yeah.
Well, they had it probably helped forge a true brotherhood.
Absolutely, yeah.
And the show, I mean, it portrayed he is extremely dislikable.
Yes,
and it's amazing that he did do a good job as Ross, because anytime I see him on the screen, I see Ross with the droopy downer Eeyore persona,
right.
And but Sobel, he was just a major asshole.
That's right.
Can you talk about the Easy Company? Tell the listener a little history of that company and how significant it was for that particular war, and how it was not done before, what they were going out to do.
Yeah, so then the idea was first initiated with these guys at Toccoa was that they would do basic training together, move on together to airborne training together, with the idea that you start them. When we talked about that brotherhood, that band of brothers, that camaraderie from the very start. In the past, you went to boot camp, and then everybody, if you wanted to go to airborne school, then they just picked and choose, your ones and twos here or there. So the idea was, let's start that camaraderie at the very, very beginning. We talk about the breaking down and building back up. So from the very start, those guys are there together from the long haul. And so that was the concept that really helped make these guys from the 506, 502nd, who trained at Toccoa, different than everybody else. From the very start, they were together.
And they actually got, as a bonus, because it was paratroopers it had never been done before, correct?
Yeah, it's new to the Americas. Yep, absolutely. To the U.S. Army, yes.
And they also they got an extra bonus, and it was minimal, but they got a bonus.
Yeah. So for a lot of these guys, I think Lesniewski, when he talks about at the beginning of one of the episodes, they're like, or Miss Maynard, hey, you want to jump out of an airplane? He said, no, I don't want to do that. It's more work. No, I don't want to do that. It's $50 a month more work. He goes, sign me up. Right. So guys coming from the Depression, $50 was a huge difference in their world.
So episode 1 takes them through the training and them going. They shipped off to England, and they were preparing for the D-Day invasion. And what they quickly learn about Sobel is that he definitely was not a boots-on-the-ground leader, and quite frankly, there was a lot of concern that they were going to cost a lot of lives, a lot more lives.
Yeah.
And can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so those of us in the world, in the cop world, there's guys you want there's supervisors you want on a barricaded person, and there's supervisors you definitely don't want on a barricaded person. So there's tactical people and there's not. And Sobel was not a tactical person. He had his strengths, but tactics was his weakness, and the men truly believed he was as much a threat to their lives as the Germans were.
And in the show, they actually had a mini revolt. Some of the sergeants, and Lipton was part of that, and some of the others, Garnier and
those guys, Rainey, exactly a mutiny, exactly what a command and Sink said. I could have you shot for this in wartime, and he was 100% correct. This is not the time and place, and this was not it. So some guys got moved out, and some guys got demoted, and but it finally woke up Sink that he's got a real problem.
Yeah, he had a real problem because they were preparing for the Operation Overlord, and it was the largest amphibian attack in war history.
That's right.
I really think, talking about the show, and I know that every show but there's always liberties, and you're kind of just going off third and fourth, fifth hand information. But I think the death knell for Sobel in that company was court martial of Winters.
It really did. It really spotlighted. He called him on the carpet. Winters. It was a genius move, and it just showed, hey, I'm not going to put up with this anymore. And in fact, and we're going to you put it in writing to me. Winters said, I'm going to put it right back. And Winters took out a pencil, and there's a copy of it in my book. You can go online and find it. You can find that piece of paper exists. So it's cool to see Winters' handwriting, and it's exactly what he said. I'll take the court martial, and Sobel had no choice. and then the upper command had to address it.
And they really had to address it, though. He got court-martialed for this, and then we're prepping for largest invasion. We're invading another country that's been occupied, and you're court-martialing one of your leaders for something so petty. Yep. And on the show, it kind of Sobel, like, spoiler alert, everybody, it's a 25-year-old show. So, but Sobel just wanted him to take it and move on because at that point, everybody had kind of just put up with everything that Sobel gave him.
Right. Yeah. He was, as the men said they said he was the king of chicken shit. I mean, that was Sobel. I'm going to ding you for nothing to show you that I can.
So the sergeants and the other leaders within the company, they go to Sink and they basically air their concerns about Captain Sobel.
Yeah.
And you said a lot of them got demoted, they got moved out, but he could have had them shot.
Yeah, 100%.
And they really went out on a limb. And the show really portrays that really greatly because Winters at the time, he had some crap duty.
He was on kitchen duty.
He was on kitchen duty, and he actually sees them come out of the Colonel Sink's headquarters, and he knew something happened, but he didn't know what.
Right.
It was amazing. So they basically they put Sobel over a training. They take the company away from him, which is also an interesting moment whenever Sink calls him into his office and he pours him a drink and he basically fires him from Easy Company.
That's right.
And puts him over some training division, which I don't think that anybody has ever touched on. Those poor bastards, what they got after he got kicked, for that training, how that went.
Yeah. Yeah. So the paratroopers had an important job in order to prep for the landings on Omaha, etc. And their job was to help secure the roads. There were 4 major roads leading out from the beaches, and their main task was to secure those roads so that the troops, once they landed on the beach, could make their way inward. And so the troopers were spread across that peninsula, more so than the original plan, to secure those bridges and start disrupting the Germans from counterattacks.
They landed on Utah Beach, correct?
Correct.
Episode 1 ends when they had some weather delays, and then they were getting ready to finally go on the jump because there was a lot of fog and inclement weather there in France.
Right.
And episode 2 starts off with the actual jump and D-Day. And your grandfather was, for what do you describe his role on D-Day?
Yeah, he would have been with the men. No different than any of the other guys. He would have had the same gear minus the weapons. Instead of weapons, he would have had the medical supplies, and his job was to be the medic. There was no ifs, ands, or buts. It was time to step up. They loaded up on those planes on the 6th.
How did it go where he got that role of being medic?
One of the million questions I don't have the answers to. I talked to Spina, who was his assistant, who was a replacement, and his assistant later on in the war. And Spina said, I signed up, and they pointed at me and said, "You're a medic." And he said, I didn't have a choice in any way, shape, or form. Doc Pepping said that when he went to go enlist, he had a questionnaire that he filled out. And one of them was, do you think you can kill a man? And he said no. And that's how he became a medic. So there was one of 2 ways. Either the Army told you were going to be a medic, or you said, I want to be a medic. And I don't know that about Roe.
But no formal training?
No. His DD-214, when he got out, listed him as a shrimp fisherman with an 8th grade education. So.
And you're out there working on combat injuries and
major trauma
to the body.
With an 8-year-old, 8th grade education and a fisherman.
Easy Company, they're still legendary. They were legendary to the Army, but the show made them legendary to the world.
That's right.
They even on in the second episode, they take over a bunch of garrison cannons.
Yep.
And to this day, that the way they overtook and attacked those weapons, they're still used to this day in West Point, right?
That's right.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Just a neat, this goes back to Winters, and you mentioned the other companies. There were a lot of companies, a lot of soldiers.
Yes.
And we're not, this is just the 101st. We're not talking about the 82nd Airborne. So there was a whole bunch of guys on that side of the division. And the men of Easy Company never, ever said we were better than anybody else. But what part of what makes Band of Brothers a great story is Winters and his leadership ability and his tactics. He was smart. He probably paid attention in all those classes. And so when he got there and realized, hey, here's Briarcourt Manor, there's 4 cannons firing on the men who are landing on the beach, who are completely helpless. Look at Saving Private Ryan, the introduction, you see those guys just being shelled. Some of that shelling was 3 miles inland. Those cannons can shoot 3 miles, just drop bombs. They knew exactly, their Germans had been there for years. They knew exactly where the angles and all that stuff is already preset. So those specific cannons were aimed at Utah Beach. They were killing our guys coming on off the boats. Winters, with very little information, here's 4 cannons, go get them. Scouts it, comes back, puts his men into play, puts them in the right places with both their carbines and M1s and the machine guns and grenades. And he tackles a fortified, fixed position, textbook style, wins the day, saves lives, loses a couple of his men, but literally saves hundreds, if not thousands, of guys on the beach.
It's incredible. And they actually got awarded some award. I didn't know at the time, they probably didn't give a crap about getting an award, right, but they did get an award for that attack. It
got Winters nominated for the Medal of Honor. It's very cool. I've been there a couple of times. It's very, very cool to walk that path that Winters walked from the rally point through the woods, and you can still see the indentations where those cannons were. It's very cool, and they're doing some archaeology on gun number 4 right now. It's been going on for over a year. They've got it all staked out, and they're an archaeologist from the university over there is doing some research. So it's very cool. What's gonna come out of that?
Let's talk about Bastogne. What went on there, and actually get into episode 6 more about your grandfather's role in the Battle of the Bulge.
So the Battle of the Bulge, as it came to be known, was a very much surprise attack by the Germans. It caught everyone in the Allied command off guard. A big push along the border there, and ended up being the 101st and 82nd. Also, some of those guys were pulled in off of leave. The MPs were literally driving around Paris and other big cities, yanking guys back off of leave. Rushed them in. The paratroopers say they made a tailgate jump. That's what they called it. They didn't jump out of an airplane. They jumped out of the back of trucks from the tailgate into Bastogne. The Germans had really hammered a couple of new units that were put there because they thought it was a safe area, and the Germans took advantage of that. So the 101st will always synonymously be known with the Battle of the Bulge in Bastogne, although there were several other units there. But the 101st was surrounded, so it became a fight out every direction, 360 degrees. So Bastogne is synonymous with the 101st Airborne's history still to this day. They still have they still call some of their units Bastogne, so it's that much of an impact.
And there was an Ardennes forest.
Correct.
Freezing cold.
One of the coldest winter in decades. Heavy snow. Obviously, being surrounded, supplies were little to none. You'll see in that episode where they're washing bandages, boiling the bandages in water, and that's a true story, 100%. And there's still some burn marks in that where it was a seminary at the time. The burn marks are still on the tile where the fires were, where they were burning to cook the bandages, try to reuse them. It's terrible. And
it lasted approximately 41 days. That battle.
Correct.
Going back to your grandfather's episode, episode 6. I don't. What is the title of that one? Do you remember?
Bastogne.
Okay. I like how the show did this. That they featured an episode. They featured a perspective from one of the characters, and I believe that the third was like, say, from Winters when they stumbled onto that whole unit, a company of Nazi SS, yeah, and they took them down, right. And then there's another one that focused on Lipton, right, out in the forest, and then this one, episode 6 from Bastogne, was your grandfather.
Right.
Can you kind of just walk the listener through, and this may be a trip down memory lane for a lot of people that's watched the show, like Sergeant Mosier here. It's been a while since he's watched it, but I just kind of walk the listener through it. Some of them are probably going to hear this for the first time.
You know, it's it's almost hard to describe when you think about what these guys were going into. So again, like I said, when they were being pulled off of leave, so they've not been given winter coats, not been given winter boots, not been given gloves. Some of them showed up with no weapon. If they did, they'd show up with a weapon with no ammo.
Food rations.
No food. So it's just, being from the South, I hate the cold, but, people up north will understand what 4 feet of snow looks like. Try to imagine what digging a hole in frozen ground, the impossibilities thereof. Not having the right equipment, literally, losing fingers and toes to this. And so you understand why some guys shot themselves, and that was their only out, to get to be that point of desperation that you're so cold and so hungry that you shoot yourself in the foot to get out of this place. And of course you're surrounded, so you're not really getting out of anything. You're moving your location, but you're not getting out of anything. So it was a terrible set of arrangements for any soldier, and then to be shelled constantly by the Germans. So now you're talking about sleep deprivation. You don't know when the shelling's going to start, where it's going to come from. You can barely dig a hole. I mean, there's stories of guys using dead Germans. They dig a hole and then put a dead German over it to help shield them from the shrapnel that falls from the ground. So that was another aspect of the German artillery. Had called it a tree burst, so it would explode 40, 50 feet above the ground. So not only do you get the shrapnel that comes from that weapon, but you get the wood. So now you've added to it the damage done. You just don't know when it's going to come. So again, you're tired, you're cold, you're hungry, you're sleep deprived, your buddies are getting shot and killed. It's just one of the worst emotional things that you could endure as a human being.
And your grandfather had to be called out throughout this entire the entire experience, but especially in this forest, because there were many shellings. I think in Lipton's episode, they focused on how incredible that the explosions were around these men all throughout the days and nights. Yeah.
And so then as a medic, so now if you're a frontline infantry guy, right, so you're responsible for yourself, maybe your buddy in the foxhole, right? And you got a field of fire that you're zoned in or responsible for. And that's the end of your responsibility. So then the medic doesn't have that option, right? He's responsible for everybody in the company. So now you're talking about 120, 140 guys that he's got to go take care of. Somebody's got, boots that don't fit or, doesn't have the socks. He's getting frostbite. He's got a cold. He doesn't get to sit and relax.
Yeah, he can't tap out and go sit somewhere.
That's right. There's no timeouts. So his role is even more impressive from my personal point of view. He's got everybody to be responsible for.
And he has to jump into action at any moment.
Yeah, the crazy thing about the medic is when the shelling and the shooting starts, everybody jumps into a hole and gets small, and he's the one that's got to get up and go run, completely exposed. It's a whole set of courage that most of us can't comprehend.
Yeah, there was a lot of death, and like even working on Garnier. And if you watch the show, Garnier was one of the kind of the stronger alpha males for Easy Company, and true leader, true hard ass. And he had he and his close friend got, basically their legs blown off.
That's right.
And your grandfather had to work on them till they were evacuated.
That's right. Yeah. So Toy got hit first, and Garnier, being Garnier, runs out to help him, and then he loses his leg. And so I asked Garnier, and Garnier did tell me, he says, your grandfather was there with me. So, so now you got two guys in the middle of shelling, busted legs, and you got to get them out.
And Toy actually wanted to come back, and he was coming off another injury and
That's
came
right.
back into
That's right.
get back in action.
That's right. Could have stayed off the line, but chose not to.
Yeah, and there's even the other story, the other part of it where Hubler accidentally shot himself out in the cold with a German Luger.
That's right.
And your grandfather had to try to save him.
Yeah. But as we know, that was probably a femoral shot. Nothing anybody could do. So tragic.
A lot of tragedy. A lot of exposure to trauma. I don't want to miss an opportunity to talk about PTSD.
Yeah, so my grandfather spoke almost nothing about the war, and so years later, after I first learned about this, my mom told me a story, and I knew that my grandfather drank after the war, and several of the men did. Malarkey was very open about his drinking, and it almost cost him his family. So there's no doubt that these men coped with alcohol. But my mom told me a story. So I'll back up. When they were training for D-Day, my grandfather met my grandmother. She was a British girl working in one of the factories, as most of them did, and he actually followed her home. She lied about her name, but he persisted. And so they were to be married on June 6th, and he no-showed, obviously. So when he came back from Normandy, they did marry. So my grandmother, so now I've got a British grandmother. And my mom said something that just clicked. She said, I believe the man my mother met before the war is not the same man that she married after the war. And so that's when it finally, it made sense. So not only was my grandfather a medic in Easy Company, he was the only medic to make it from D-Day to Hitler's Eagle's Nest. He saw every guy that was hit. He saw every guy that was killed. And he was always on the line. There was no timeout for him. He was never seriously wounded. So he was with the men the entire war, saw all of that. There's no way any human being can see all those guys hurt, killed, mangled, and be the same man. And so he drank, and it cost him his first marriage.
We talk about it a lot, too, as far as people using alcohol to cope, and that still goes on to this day, dealing with trauma, and it ruins lives, it ruins marriages, and it can ruin your mind. But dealing with this kind of constant exposure to trauma also takes, every time you deal with a traumatic event, it takes a piece of you.
Yep.
You're never going to get back.
You're never the same.
So I want to get into Doc Roe Publishing.
Okay.
I want you to tell the listener the story about how this came about, and I want to get into your why and mission for this.
So the main impetus for this was the men. Winters, Buck Compton, Don Malarkey, Bill and Babe started dying, passing on in the early 2010s. And what those guys they were all stalwarts of the company. They were the big names and part of the glue that held it together. But one thing they all had in common was they all went to schools and talked to kids about their wartime experiences. And I thought, man, who's going to tell these stories? It's over. These guys are gone. And that's what really got me the idea. I'm gonna write a book. I was gonna start with a flash drive. I could just mail you a flash drive, and you could do. I was like, well, I don't know anything about flash drives and all that stuff, but I think I can write a book. I think I can tell this story, and then now I can hand a kid a book, and he can learn, and he can hear these guys' words and learn these guys' stories. That was what got me going.
I'm glad you touched on why children's books, because there's many books out there that are nonfiction and also fictionalized versions of true events from these wars. But the children's books, you're given a perspective to kids. They're learning about true history, but it also is the mission is to keep this memory alive.
Yeah, 100%. I joke all the time. I'm a product of Louisiana public education, so you rank that where you'd like. And then I graduated LSU. Go Tigers. So I'll never be smart enough to write a 250-page history book. That's not my thing. But I think I can reach kids, and that was my goal. Yeah, you've got to plant that seed. You've got to make kids aware that these stories exist, so that when they grow up, they can go read that 250-page history book. But if you don't plant that seed, it's much more difficult for them. And we're also, sidebar on this. I mean, we're facing a country that, there's an attack on the flag. There's an attack on the American values in this country that many of us are very upset about. And kids are made to not love their country anymore. And, all these protests are based on the back of these men who fought a whole system that didn't let you protest anything. These men gave their lives for other people in other countries to have the right to protest and to love their country and things like that. So this was a big thing to me, that make kids, hey, these are the sacrifices that you may not be learning about in school, but you need to know these men fought and died and suffered. The men who came back home suffered, so that you can live in America and live in this freedom.
How difficult was it to write these?
It's funny. It's funny you asked that. I thought, Band of Brothers has been written. There's a 10-part miniseries. I'll knock this out in 3 months. It took me 18 months to put this thing together. It is much, and this is a 62-page book that's on a middle school reading level.
It's my reading level.
Yeah, no, and half of those words are, half of those pages are pictures. So, it's much more difficult. I have a huge amount of respect for authors. It's much more difficult than you think. And I'm not creating anything. I'm not making anything up. Now I wanted to
telling a story.
I'm telling a story. Yeah, and 80% of it already exists. And I went and found some things that you probably don't know, because I wanted adults to be able to be informed and entertained by it. But I wanted a middle school kid to be able to read this and go, man, that's really cool. I learned a lot. It was informative, and I enjoyed it, right? Because reading for kids is not always enjoyable. I wanted it to be enjoyable. That's why there's pictures. I wanted to tell a story, that plant that seed, get them interested in what these men did.
Can you talk about Miss Hellerman's role?
As the illustrator.
The illustrator.
Yes. It's funny because I don't know what her voice sounds like. We communicated everything over the internet. I told a cop buddy who was a Bobby. He was a London Bobby. I told him my idea, and he goes, well, you've got to talk to Annika, because she's big into World War II. She paints on the back of bomber jackets, and that's a big thing. People from around the world mail her their leather jackets, and she paints like the bomber guys did. And so I did a messenger, and she was 100%. Of course, she's Dutch, and the Dutch love American soldiers because they were under the Nazi boot for 5 years. They're huge fans, and obviously the 101st helped liberate their country, so they're huge fans of the 101st. So I'm a terrible artist. Like if I draw a stick figure, I've got to label it. This is a stick figure. That's how bad it is. So I would kind of try to sketch out as much as I could, and I'd send her the snippets of the episodes, and she just took it and ran with it. She was it's awesome. Of course, I don't need to explain to you. I say a lot of times, Annika drew a book, and I added some words to it. That's kind of how it goes. And it's really been the case for all three of my illustrators. They've done beyond my expectations.
I can say that you're talking about, it's geared towards like a middle schooler can pick it up. My daughter is just starting 6th grade next week, and she has read all three of them and loves them.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And for the listener, I'm going to be posting a bunch of photos of these books and where you can find them. And and anybody here in DPD that would probably want one, I think we know the author a little bit, so you might get it autographed.
Happy to do it.
So I want to talk about the first book. Tell the listener the title and how damn nervous were you putting out this?
Yeah, very nervous. How Easy Company Became a Band of Brothers. And gosh, just coming up with the title is difficult. I wanted to convey, what these guys endured and what they became together, and that's it. That's the Band of Brothers. It's a worldwide phenomenon. A major historian wrote the first book. Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg tell the story, and I'm going to kind of come from behind after all these guys and try to. It was huge. Again, Louisiana public education. Hey, so very nervous. I had a lot of people look at it and make sure that things you don't think about. What was their rank? At the beginning of the war as opposed to the end of the war. Make sure their names are spelled right. There's a lot of things you have to get right. It's funny you say that. It was a huge amount of nervousness to finally get it published.
There's always, hell, even answering a call, going up and teaching a class, presenting to a class is one thing. I could speak from doing this, starting up this show from scratch. You mentioned things about coming up with a title. Mm-hmm. Coming up with a name for this was not in a mission and a why and what structure you're going to work within. But there's also that feeling of not wanting to fail.
Correct. Yeah, you can't. In your life and mine. You're talking about real people. You're telling stories of real people. You can't fail.
Talk about you really feeling the need to do everybody's story justice in this.
Yeah. Again, I latched on so many times of the actors talking about how it was imparted into them and how they just took it 100% mind, body, and soul. hey, I'm representing a real man who fought in a real war, whose family is going to watch this, and I've got to do it right, and I've got to do it the very best I can. And there's all kinds of stories we could, get into that another day, but these guys really took that passion on. So yeah, 100%. I want to make sure these guys' story is told right. I want it to be so entertaining that it just draws these kids in, and they go, I want to learn more.
And there's plenty more out there that you can get. This could steer them to.
That's right. I've always wanted my books to be a springboard.
You got the first one out. What's the reception like? The friends and family?
Very good. And as you know, it was a huge relief to know that I did it right. People, well, not to my credit, to the series, but I have mailed this book to 23 other countries outside of America. And again, a testament to the series, not me, but that's the amazing part that so many people, we're not talking about Americans, just Americans. And I've had some good friends who have translated that first book into French, Dutch, German, and Chinese. And those are friends of mine who love the series, love the men, love the story, who wanted it to be able to be read in their native language so their countrymen can hear these stories. None of them asked for any money for the translation. They asked for no money to be paid, royalties, any of the sort. Never, the conversations never, just a love of the stories and the men, and make sure that the next generations, they translated it for me. So awesome.
They wanted to be a part of it.
Absolutely.
And to be a part of the putting the story out there and letting it stretch well beyond this country.
Absolutely.
Second book, Patrick, how did that come about?
Patrick the Paratrooper. So when you see the cover, you'll see Patrick looks like I thought a 10-year-old boy. And the artist Ricardo Lima had drawn that. I saw it on Instagram, and I thought, that's a 10-year-old boy in a paratrooper outfit. And so it just hit me. I mean, again, just right then and there, hey, what if a 10-year-old boy, what if I could tell the story from a 10-year-old boy's point of view? So Patrick witnesses D-Day and decides he's going to enlist in the Army, sees the paratrooper poster on the wall, thinks how cool that would be, and becomes a paratrooper, gets assigned to Easy Company, and the rest is history. So he goes through the war. He tells the story from his point of view. There's a little surprise ending. I won't ruin it for you, but it allows a young adult to learn about the Band of Brothers story from their point of view, without the blood and guts and all that kind of stuff, without the PTSD that they're not yet ready to assimilate, but it tells the story and plants that seed, and they understand a little bit about the Band of Brothers.
How long, what time frame was it from the first book to the second book?
First book was, I think, 2018, and it's so about 5 years. Wow. From first to second.
So when you started working on Patrick, when did you know you were going to continue this series and these book writing? I didn't.
I saw Patrick and go, there's my idea. There was no plan.
It came to you.
It just came to me.
Well, again, you're like, wait, I'm just kind of, I'm kind of riding the wave of the success of this first one. Do I want to go out here again and put myself out here again?
Yeah. I thought my first book is, like I said, like middle school age and up. And I wanted to find a way to reach younger kids. So elementary. So I say my second and third book are elementary.
Okay. And third book is everybody loves a puppy.
Everybody loves a puppy. Draftee marches with the Band of Brothers, and I'll tell you that story came again. I was doing a book signing at the World War II Museum in New Orleans, and which is very cool, very very special, honored to be invited to do that. That's not everybody gets that chance, so that was very cool. And on a break, I was walking through the aisles looking at the other books, and there was a book about a bulldog that the Marines had in the Pacific during World War II, and I go, wait a second, Easy Company has a dog. Why not tell that story? And so that's where that one came from, completely on a whim. And so Draftee is a true story. There really was a Jack Russell Terrier stray who Easy Company found along the way on the march after they left Toccoa. Sink marched them from Toccoa to Atlanta. True story. They met Draftee. True story. They adopted him. True story. And it does have a happy ending, but Draftee tells the story from his point of view. So the dog tells the story, which I hope reaches kids at that level and plants that seed.
No, that's incredible. Because there's so many different perspectives of life, and then when you focus in on this particular war, this particular company, you have all these different little storylines that are based on true events.
Right.
I love that. What year did that one come out?
24.
So you keep getting, and I'm glad you're smiling when you're talking about these. So I'm glad that you're finding enjoyment out of doing these and keeping this alive. Can you share with any other ideas that you may have been inspired you to work on?
I hesitate to say that. They always say in the Hollywood business, you're not supposed to talk about a project until it's done. For years I've behind the scenes of the cast and the crew. So the story of Band of Brothers from the behind the scenes is something I've been working on, and I need to get off my tail and finish that. Life is busy, but I have a lot of pages typed out already, and that's an incredible piece to hear what went into these guys. You're back to, they wanted to honor the men, so hearing the stories of how they honored the men, and you're not talking about just the people. You're talking about thread count of the patch. They found they took a World War II patch of the Screaming Eagle, counted the threads, and reproduced it. That's the level of dedication this series was, and so that transcended the entire process, that mindset. So there's a little teaser.
Okay, well, I don't want you to show all your cards, but I'm excited. I'm excited that you're continuing, and this is going to. It sounds like it's going to be a different target audience.
Yes, it'll be for the big boys and girls.
All right. Well, maybe Dan could read it to me.
Yes.
Or you come in and read the audio book to
pictures,
me.
yeah, it.
Story hour.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you talk about the authenticity of what they put into that show, because I had read and they did the same with Saving Private Ryan. Spielberg did it, and as well as Band of Brothers, they actually went in and they had these sounds of certain cannon fire and certain rifle fire. They wanted it to be as authentic as it was then.
That's right. Big deal for those guys.
It is a big deal for those guys. They take a lot. I mean, their filmmaking and acting and movie producing is legendary, but this show, Band of Brothers, for Tom Hanks and Spielberg, was a personal passion, and the whole World War II event was personal to them.
That's right.
To do it right and do these people's stories right. I want to talk about your experiences with the survivors. You went to a lot of these reunions, and can you talk about some of the people you've met?
I was fortunate to meet most of them. The Rogers and Garnier and Babe and Heffron and Buck, and met Winters once, Strayer, and to see these guys afterward was, because now you're meeting them in their 70s. So you watch them on screen as young guys, and then you're seeing them as really grandfathers. It was very cool. They were everything that you would expect them to be. They were all very humble. There was a different personalities, just like if you put 100 people anywhere, and you're going to have different personalities, but very genuine. They all shared that bond, and you could just feel it. Even in their 70s, they were so obviously very comfortable with each other at the reunions. And Rogers and those guys would still crack jokes on each other. So they've been doing that for decades. So it was really cool to see them bask in the glory, but be completely humble in it also at the same time.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because basking in the glory and getting recognized for, what they did for the world. We have very short memories about the liberties that we have today were because of other people's sacrifice.
Yep.
I'm really glad what you're doing, and it wasn't really until the 90s that we started seeing more of the stories of World War II. You had movies like Tora 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 and Longest Day and things like that, and they were good, but they were more like official accounts, and they didn't really get into the nitty gritty of what these guys went through individually. But yeah, around the 90s, you started seeing these, like Band of Brothers came out, Saving Private Ryan, and really understanding what they went through. And I think a lot of us, it was good for our generation to see that, because we grew up with these people as our grandparents. but they never talked about it.
Right.
And we didn't know what they really went through. And, you know, you watch the movies from back in the 70s, and it didn't show the blood and guts.
Right.
We really need to know what they went through, because what are we complaining about? Oh crap, my Wi-Fi went out. Well, what these guys went through was monumental and just horrible. And they came home and they built a society and they fought for us. And I really appreciate that you've written these books, because it's really, we need to remember these stories. When we grew up, World War I was kind of a distant memory, and it's unfortunate. But I'm glad we're preserving this now.
Chris, where could people find these books and purchase them and maybe get a personal connection from the author himself?
Yeah, absolutely. They're all on Amazon, so you can get them at any time. Amazon will every so often throw them on sale, but for the same cover price. If you'll reach out to me, I'm happy to do a signed copy. I'll cover the postage, so you're not out of pocket anything different, but at least you have a signed copy. Mail it to grandkids. I've done that. You know, grandparents live in Florida, and the grandkids live in Tennessee. I'll mail it to wherever you want it to go. So I'm happy to do that. You'll find Doc Roe Publishing on Facebook and Instagram, so you can find me there and send me a message.
Doc Eugene Roe, he passed in 1998. Now that you have all of this knowledge of his sacrifice, his heroism, if you had the chance to say one last thing to him, what would that be?
You're my hero. Because he is. He's my hero too. I'd ask him how he did it. How did he get through it? How did he do all that he did? How did he do it?
Hey brother, hey sister, I'll never give up on you. Hey Mrs., hey mister, I'll see this all the way through. No matter how far the sun and the moon, I'll never give up on you. Down when you're lonely, I'll pull you up. Life leaves you heavy when the going gets tough. I'll be your shoulder, together we'll run up from the bottom, yeah, we'll rise above. Hey brother, hey sister, I'll never give up on you. Hey Mrs., hey mister, I'll see this all the way through. No matter how far the sun and the moon, I'll never give up on you. Sister, I'll never give up on you. Hey Mrs., hey mister, I'll see this all the way through. No matter how far, for the gold and the blue, I'll never give up.